Hi guys, it's Alex. For my data collection technique, I chose to do observations. I felt that was the data collection technique I would use the most in my action research project, so I was excited to learn more about it. So just to start off with a big picture of what observations are, is it's carefully watching and systematically recording. And it's really important that you know this is a normal component of your everyday teaching life. It's not something out of the blue. It's something that you're very familiar with, even though you might not even know it, because as teachers, it's what we do every day in the classroom. So Mills kind of explained that there are three ways to be an observer. And the first way is to be an active participant observer, which really means that you are actively engaged in the teaching and you're observing the outcomes for your own teaching. So when I thought of this, I pretty much thought of what we do as teachers every day, and I figured the active participant observer would be what we're going to be in the action research project. It's going to be our own class, and we're going to be doing our own teaching, and it's for our own benefit. And the second kind of observer is the privileged active observer. So you observe students when you're not actually responsible for the lesson. So this could also be us as teachers. I kind of thought of it more as when maybe you're observing a student behavior and they go to art class. So you go with them to art class to observe them. You're not actually responsible. They're not really going to come to you for anything in the lesson, but they're still your kids. They still know you, but you're not really the one that's responsible for the lesson at that time. And the third observer is the passive observer, which means you are not the teacher at all. You're just there to collect data. And I really thought of this as being a student teacher, or kind of when you're in college and you're doing your pre-service student teaching and you're just observing in a classroom and you're taking notes. You're not teaching the lesson, you're not the teacher, you're not responsible, but you're still observing student behaviors. So going into how to start conducting an observation, this quote really stuck out to me the most. I thought it was very important and it summed up everything perfectly, and this was from the Mertler text. And he said, stop thinking and just write what you see. Don't overthink things. Just write down exactly what you're observing, because otherwise you're going to go crazy trying to process it and interpret it while you go. So don't try to observe every single thing in the classroom. And he really advised to start with a broad idea and then become more specific as you observe, because the patterns will emerge on their own the longer you observe. You don't really want to go into it with just one small thing and then not really get enough information from it. So if you start big and then go small, you'll get the information naturally and the patterns will just come to you. And Mertler also suggested making 2 columns on a piece of paper. I thought this was actually really helpful. So to make 2 columns, and then on the left-hand column, you write exactly what you observe. And in the second column, the right-hand column, you write your own interpretations of that. And then having it separate really gives you more credibility, because when you look back on it, you'll know the difference between, oh, this is what I observed, and this is what I think it means, and you're not confusing the two. And we're actually going to talk a little more about that later too. So we'll come back to that thought. Observations are qualitative data. They collect qualitative data. So it is all collected in words. It's not numerical data. It occurs pretty naturally in the classroom, and it's experience-based. And it's a great tool to collect data on student behaviors and student interactions, those things that you don't really need numbers for. You're just kind of observing their behaviors. Pretty straightforward. Some of the strengths to observations, I know I already mentioned this, but it's something we do every single day. So it's not like you have to learn a brand new technique. You already do it, even if it's not exactly meaningful. You do it every single day, no matter what. It's not really time consuming because, like I said, it's something that we've all been doing since we started teaching, is observing our classrooms as we go and observing our students. So it's not really time consuming. Like I said, you don't have to learn anything new. You don't really have to prepare any materials. You just observe them. And it's a great tool to reflect on your own teaching. And I thought a really interesting strength was there's so many different ways to do observations. You could do audio recordings, videotapes were actually highly suggested so that you can go back, look through the tapes, and then get any information that you may have missed. You could do speech bubbles while the kids are talking. You could do illustrations if that's more meaningful to you. Whatever makes sense to you to collect data is a way that you can do observations. There was really no right or wrong technique or tool to use, I guess is what I'm saying. But of course, there are some weaknesses, and the biggest weakness through all the texts I found was that if you are trying to record everything, it's going to be a downfall because it is physically impossible to do that. You're not going to be able to record every single thing that's happening in your classroom. So don't even try. And that is kind of where some people go wrong when they're doing observations, is that they think they need to write down this and 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 this, and then you're just going to drive yourself crazy and you're going to get no information out of it at all. So that's definitely something to look out for. And another weakness is that sometimes you may have to give up your time as the teacher. I know I already said it's not time consuming, which it doesn't have to be time consuming. But if you are the privileged active observer or the passive observer and you're not the teacher actually teaching the lesson, then it is going to have to be during your planning time, or somebody has to come cover your room so you can go observe something else, and then it will take away from your own teaching time or your planning time, your prep time. And Mertler did warn that research should never be done at the expense of your teaching, because it's a tool that is there to enhance your teaching. So if you're sacrificing your students' instructional time to do observations, then it's probably not the best tool to use at the time. And this kind of flows right into the last point I want to make about some other concerns about observations and things to watch out for, is that it really should be objective. And making that 2-column chart that Mertler suggested will really help with that, having your observations on one side and then your interpretations on the other side, just to keep them separated really makes it more credible, so that later on you're not getting confused, especially if there are your own students and you know them and you kind of mismatch what you observed but what you interpreted it as, that was weird. I lost my train of thought. So keeping the 2 separate columns will just really help you kind of keep that difference between what you see and then going back and saying what you think it means. And another concern was, don't hesitate to record something because you think it will reflect poorly on your own teaching. Nobody is a perfect teacher, and if you record something that doesn't really make you look the best, it still might be important for your data, and it will be important to you so that you can go back and fix it. So don't be afraid to write something down that makes you look bad. Everybody's just learning, so don't be afraid to stay away from those kinds of observations just because you don't want to feel bad about your teaching. So that's basically all I have about observations. I'm definitely not an expert, but if you have any questions, I can try to answer them for you. And I can't wait to read about your other data techniques. Thank you.